Dear colleagues, good evening, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro.
Welcome to the 10th meeting of the Standing Committee on Science and Research.
A few rules. The Board of Internal Economy requires that committees adhere to the following health protocols, which are in effect until June 23rd, 2022. All individuals wishing to enter the parliamentary precinct must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. All those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask except for members who are at their place during proceedings. And please contact our excellent clerk of the committee for further information on preventative measures for health and safety. As the chair, I will enforce these measures, and as always, I thank you for your cooperation. La réunion d'aujourd'hui.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format in compliance with the Standing Order of the House of Commons.
Services are available for this meeting. You may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen, you may choose to hear floor, audio, or in English or French. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to speak. Un rappel que vous devriez adresser.
Just a quick reminder that you need to speak through the chair when you make all your remarks.
Microphone should be muted. The committee clerk and I will maintain a speaking list for all members. I'd like to welcome our excellent witnesses tonight. This is exciting. This is the second study of this inaugural committee. The study is on top talent, research, and innovation. So for this first panel, we have Thomas Bell, a professor from Imperial College London. From the Quebec Student Union, we have Jonathan Desroches, President. From the University of Toronto, the Monk School of Global Affairs, we have David Wolf, Professor and Co-Director, Innovation Policy Lab. We welcome you. We will be having 5-minute statements from each of you. And with that, we will start with Professor Bell. For 5 minutes, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to speak with you today in my personal capacity as a Canadian and also as an academic living abroad. Although I've lived outside of Canada for some years, I have a strong connection to Canada. I visit frequently and have much experience with the Canadian grant funding system, having sat on the NSERC Discovery Grant Committee for Ecology and Evolution for 3 years, a committee that I then co-chaired for 1 year. And in these roles, I've read and evaluated the research programs for a large portion of ecology and evolution research in the country, so I'm well aware of the quality of Canadian science. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Montreal, and I went to McGill for my bachelor's in biology. My graduate degrees were both funded through scholarships from NSERC, first as a master's student at the University of British Columbia, and then overseas at the University of Oxford in England for my doctoral degree. I was quickly hired as a lecturer in Oxford for several years. I was then awarded a Royal Society Research Fellowship, which funded my salary for 8 years, allowing me to focus exclusively on my research. And during that time, I moved to Imperial College and was made full professor 2 years ago. I've recently been awarded a large grant to develop and direct a new research center, which will occupy me for at least the next 10 years. I've described my background because I believe it's relevant to the committee's work, and I understand it's the reason why you have asked me here today. Having been lured out of Canada by the prospects of new opportunities, I've become embedded in the system over here. And as for any career, and as I'm sure many on the committee can appreciate, it becomes more difficult to move over time. Partly this is because you learn how the system works, and partly because personal situations change. You start a family, you buy a house, and so forth, all of which anchor you in one location. I believe it's important for the committee to consider what motivates scientists to move or to stay. So how do you retain and attract the best scientists to Canada? I can speak from my personal experience. First, top scientists are attracted by top science, and the rest, I believe, is window dressing. This is not a novel opinion and has been true since the start of the university system. While there's an understandable desire for governments to focus on technological innovation rather than discovery science, the one is not possible without the other. The best scientists will not come to Canada and will not stay in Canada if they feel that their science will suffer. Inspiration and innovation almost always come from being in environments with other top scientists in complementary fields. This can create a positive feedback loop where strength builds on strength, and the best scientists come because the best scientists are already there. And to a large extent, the question of how to attract and retain top scientists should therefore be rooted in how science innovation can be fostered in Canada right now. I think if you build it, then they'll come. The second point that I wanted to make is that attracting scientists and retaining scientists are two separate issues. There are significant academic costs in moving labs. It's hugely disruptive. Packing up and reassembling a lab takes time, often resulting in months of inactivity. Moving to a new university means relearning all the internal systems and ways of doing things, and moving countries is doubly disruptive. Scientists moving into Canada for the first time need to learn how funding and hiring works, how to attract students, and need to build their collaboration networks from scratch. Many will have young families and will need to learn how the school system works, and the cost of moving is therefore very high for a scientist. So attracting the top scientists to Canada is more difficult than retaining scientists. If you want to attract the top scientists from outside the country, these significant additional costs should be considered. My third point is that junior and senior scientists have different motivations. It often only takes a nudge in one direction early in the career to change an academic trajectory. Later career researchers, proven talent, are lower risk, but more costly to move, and often with a shorter scientific career ahead of them. I believe the committee should carefully consider these divergent motivations when they make recommendations about how to retain scientists at different career stages. And finally, I think it's worth mentioning that you're competing for the top scientists in a global marketplace. To attract and retain the top scientists, you need to understand what financial and scientific rewards will draw them to Canada, or they'll go elsewhere. In Britain and Europe, the funding opportunities are much greater and more varied than in Canada. The concentration of universities is also much greater and more varied. The system over here is far from perfect, but from that perspective, Canada starts at a disadvantage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Bell, and congratulations on the recent professorship, and we appreciate the hour you're speaking to us tonight. Before we go to our second one, I will give you a warning, this yellow card at 4.5 minutes, so you know there's 30 seconds to go. Thank you so much. We will now go to President Desroches for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jonathan Desroches, President of the Quebec Student Union. The UEQ represents 91,000 university students in Quebec and works in partnership on the federal scene with CASA, the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. Together, UEQ and CASA represent over 365,000 students at all levels across the country. I'd like to begin by thanking the committee for the invitation to testify and present the student perspective on federal research issues. The work you are doing is important and ultimately highlights the underfunding of the student scholarship programs of the SROS, SSHRC, NSERC and CAIHA. This underfunding has major consequences on the entire research ecosystem in Canada, and the various guests with whom you have discussed the issue in recent months have all acknowledged that the student programs of the SBOs are not adequately funded. To give you some statistical context, in the last 10 years, the share of NSERC's budget that is allocated to student scholarships programs has gone from 13% of its total funding to 8%. For the SSHRC, it has gone from 17% 10 years ago to about 13% now. And for CAIHA, it has gone from about 7% to 5%, but it's almost impossible to get access to their data and a detailed picture. In order to regain the proportion of funding granted to student bursary programs about 10 years ago, the Quebec Student Union estimates that an investment of $120 million is needed in student bursary programs. Concretely, in our opinion, this funding must be used to respond to one of the concerns of the Naylor report, namely to increase the duration of student grants. Currently, his master's scholarships last 1 year and doctoral scholarships last 3 months, or rather 3 years. while a master's degree generally takes at least 2 years and a doctorate at least 4 years. So we find ourselves in a situation where we cut off the source of income for our graduate students in the last years of their studies, which obviously lengthens the time to graduation because the student will have to find an alternative source of income to meet his or her needs. Therefore, it lengthens the time to graduation or even makes graduation impossible. In fact, the Canada Research Chair on Transformations in Scholarly Communication at the Université de Montréal has shown that a funded student is more likely to graduate than an underfunded student, and obviously this is not a big surprise. I was talking about the duration of the scholarships, but in order for the scholarships to really allow students to focus on their master's or doctorate, you have to make sure that the value of the scholarships is adequate. Now, and I think this was mentioned by a guest in the last few weeks, the value of student scholarships has not increased in about 20 years. I'm talking about $21,000 scholarships for NSERC and $20,000 scholarships for the SSHRC. The amount of the scholarships must be sufficient to allow students to concentrate on their study and research. And of course, indexing these scholarships would be a great idea so that they don't lose their value in the long term. Finally, regarding funding, if we wish to increase the number of students who choose to start a PhD to do research at the highest level and therefore participate now and in the future in the innovation of Canada and the country in general, in all sectors and all fields of research, we need to increase the opportunities. Therefore, we need to increase the number of scholarships offered by the student programs to the OSF. The lack of funding prevents us from taking advantage of the talent pool that is already there. The excellent applicants are there. We need to support them. Of course, as with anything, funding is at the heart of the matter, but there is another element which does not require investment that I want to raise with you that can make a difference. Indeed, on the boards of the FSOs, there is no student representation, unlike, for example, what we see in Quebec with the Fonds de Recherche du Québec, where each board of directors has a student seat. Within the OSF, the student voice is not heard, and we suspect that this is one of the reasons why student issues in research are put aside. To improve the situation, we invite you to be inspired by the model put in place in Quebec by Rémi Quiron, the chief scientist of Quebec, and to modify the 3 pieces of legislation on the composition of the GC and the OSF in order to add a student representation. In closing, it's important to remember that the master's and doctoral degrees represent the gateway to a career in research and innovation. Graduate students are not only the researchers of tomorrow, but also the researchers of today, as they're already contributed significantly to scientific publications and to the evolution of knowledge during their studies. Thank you, and I look forward to discussing this further and to responding to your questions.
Dr. Desroches, merci. Thank you very much. And now we will go to the University of Toronto, the Munk School of Global Affairs, Professor David Wolf. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to emphasize that I'm speaking as a professor at the University of Toronto and the co-director of the Innovation Policy Lab. I don't represent the Munk School, and I'm certainly not authorized to speak for the University of Toronto as a whole. I've been studying innovation in Canada for the past 40 years. I served as a member of the expert panel for the Council of Canadian Academies in 2018, competing in the global innovation economy. And I want to expand the mandate I was given by the committee a little bit to address the innovation aspect of your title. As the recent federal budget acknowledged, Canada is currently experiencing a crisis of business innovation. And there's a growing recognition that in order to succeed, we need to invest more in growth-oriented small and medium-sized companies that have high export and innovation potential. These firms are often labeled scale-up firms. Research that we've undertaken at the Innovation Policy Lab using the most comprehensive review of StatCan microdata finds that these firms have a disproportionate effect on job creation and revenue generation. Compared to non-scale-ups, they have a much greater impact on revenue generation, they innovate more, and they're more productive, and they often export more, which is critical for Canada. So the critical challenge for us is to identify the policy support that scale-ups need to maintain their success and continue to export and grow. We've also conducted extensive interviews with technology scale-up firms in Canada to identify what they need. The research results are clear and unambiguous. Scale-ups need access to capital, access to talent, and access to markets in order to grow. The kind of government policies they're looking for are ones that will provide them with these three critical ingredients to support their growth. None is more challenging than the need for later stage growth capital. There's simply not enough programs in Canada to help scale-ups expand once they reach a certain critical threshold, often around $50 million in revenue and sales. Once they reach that point, they're often left to their own devices to find growth financing, which typically comes from abroad. And this often results in the sale of majority control to investors, foreign investors, which increases the odds of an early exit before the Canadian scale-up has reached its full potential. With respect to talent, which is also critical, scale-up firms are appreciative of the measures that have been taken in recent years by the federal government to accelerate the hiring of foreign technology workers with unique or specialized skills that can help them. There's one consistent finding. It's the depth of the local labor market for critical skills that anchors many of our most successful technology clusters in place. And our universities, polytechnics, and community colleges have been the critical providers of many of those technical skills. Another key finding is that post-secondary institutions are relatively good at reading and anticipating local labor market conditions and expanding their programs offerings to meet anticipated demand. However, there's often a lag, especially in times of rapid expansion like the present, when the demand for skills can outpace the ability of post-secondary institutions to respond. The dilemma in the current period is exacerbated by the dramatic inflow we've seen of foreign multinationals setting up research operations in high technology centers across the country, such as Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, to tap into the specialized skills available in those labor markets. This creates competition in the local labor markets between domestic firms trying to scale and the inward flow of investment from multinationals. It also generates pressure on local wages that's advantageous for the individuals being hired, but exacerbates the challenges faced by domestic firms in scaling. We may be in a situation where post-secondary institutions need greater public support in the short term to rapidly expand their intake of students in programs with high demand for their graduates. Here, I'm thinking along the lines of the Access to Opportunities program that was introduced by the Ontario government in the late 1990s to increase the number of computer science graduates in Ontario universities by 20,000 a year over 3 years. So a total of 60,000 increased graduates were funded by the provincial government over 3 years. I recognize this is primarily a provincial area of jurisdiction, but there are numerous precedents for the federal government to provide funding to support post-secondary education, and the federal government is still currently doing that in principle through existing health and social transfer. The final policy area is access to markets. One of the most commonly stated preferences by scale-up firms is for the Canadian government to assume a more active role in employing demand-side instruments such as procurement in a targeted fashion to act as a market maker in support of scale-up firms in strategic technologies sectors. Procurement was frequently cited as a missed opportunity to enable Canadian firms to overcome pressures for early exit by using the government as a reference customer.
Professor Wolf, I am so sorry to interrupt. I know, I'm sure colleagues are going to follow up. I've got to be fair to everyone.
I knew I had a little more than was allowed. I'm happy to respond to questions.
I'm just going to say we want to thank all of you. We're delighted you're here. And now we're going to go to questioning from our members. This will be a 6-minute round. And we'll begin with Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for our witnesses today. Mr. Wolf, just along the lines you're talking about procurement of or government procuring more services from the sector, if I heard you correctly, what would that look like? Like what services could the government be procuring from?
I'm talking about often about not just services, but goods and products. Often, we have common purpose procurement programs. The federal government's introduced several programs over the past 5-6 years to purchase innovative products from small Canadian technology firms. These programs need to be deepened and expanded. The critical notion is the idea of a reference customer. Firms often tell us that when they go into international markets to try to sell their goods overseas, one of the first questions they get is who's buying their product in Canada, and they want to know that it makes a big difference if they're selling to federal or provincial governments.
Just to follow up on that one, what are the markets that we're unfortunately not in right now for these scale-up companies? What countries, I guess, would be?
You know what? That would require a detailed study that I haven't undertaken.
Okay.
I think if you look at the overall export statistics, we sell primarily into the U.S., to a secondary degree to the U.K., a little bit to the EU. But if you also look at the composition of our exports, the overall composition, we export overwhelmingly minerals, oil and gas, and manufactured goods, particularly automotive products. High technology exports are a minor fraction of those other three goods and commodities.
Great. I got a couple more questions for you, and then I'm going to switch over to Jonathan. You talked about the 3-year plan that the Ontario government had to increase graduation, I believe, by 20-some thousand. Can you report on
20,000 a year for 3 years?
And were they successful in increasing that?
I believe they were. This was colloquially referred to as the Nortel program. It resulted from a tremendous amount of pressure exerted on the government by Nortel in the late 90s when they were expanding rapidly. I've heard some people express the view that it was a waste because all those people came on stream just as the tech collapse occurred in 2001, 2002. But if you look at the long term, at the current shortages and the current demand that we're still facing, and at the rapid growth of the tech economy globally over the past 20 years, those positions, all those graduates were absorbed into the economy. And we're in a comparable position today.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Switching gears a little bit to Jonathan, our president from the Quebec Students' Union. You talked about increased funding of, I believe, $120 million, or that would satisfy what you were the ask. As much as this is education for the most part, as been identified, is provincial. What we're on that ask, that's the positive ask, but unfortunately, in the realities, how indebted our country is now, we might have to go the other way. So if you were going to save $10 million on the post-secondary education in Quebec, where do you think that cut would first be?
Merci de la question.
Well, thank you for the question. Just to clarify, funding issues are indeed a provincial area of jurisdiction, but funding research is a federal bailiwick to a large extent. So I was referring to research bursaries under the purview of the federal government, in fact. And I'm aware that there are difficult choices that need to be made, but that's why we are referring to the notion of research and innovation, because it contributes to the capacity of innovation in Canada and in Quebec long term, such that our researchers are well supported and that they may ultimately be able to create businesses, set up businesses in the not-for-profit sector and elsewhere. We know that researchers in the past used to always stay in academia. That's no longer the case. Often researchers, once they finish their doctorates, start up companies, businesses, private enterprises, and this is great for Canada's economy.
So if we were going to target funding for a little bit on the positive outcomes, if we were going to spend an extra dollar on education / scholarships and whatnot, support more capital and maybe a tax credit of some sort for the would-be businesses once to encourage additional growth and or to encourage hopefully students and research in general. We need to encourage general research, but I think that as a country, if we're going to meet our potential, we need to double down on research that actually produces a product of some sort that we can market to the world. I'm running out of time, so just quickly, on that concept, is there, and just in general, you talk about Quebec, I'm out, okay.
You have 15 seconds.
No, I got a longer one that.
Do you want to ask them to table it, Mr.?
I'll come back to it.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Tucker. Thank you. And to the witnesses, you can see you have a really interested committee here. For Mr. Tucker, we will now go to Mr. McKinnon for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just clarify what you were, Mr. Desrochers, what you were talking about with my colleague. Am I to understand that cutting back on scholarships and so forth would be a false economy?
Exactement.
Exactly. That is what I would say, actually.
Sorry, I didn't hear your response. I didn't have my earpiece in.
Exactly. That is what I would say. I.e., it would limit the capacity of Canada to support our researchers in the long term, and that would be damaging for the economy, to my mind.
So, from your point of view, the more putting more money into graduate students and post-grad students to develop their skills in Canada would have long-term beneficial economic results as well as scientific results for Canada?
Oui, exactement.
Yes, exactly. And we've based this on the Naylor report from 2017 regarding science capacity in Canada, and it recommends increasing bursaries for doctorates and master's degrees. We know that the pool of candidates and applications is there, so we just need to fund them such that there are more students who have access to doctoral degrees. The fact of the matter is that without funding, all of these students that meet all the criteria are faced with a tough choice. They have to either do the research free of charge or work in another field or start a new career. So we end up losing talent. There's an exodus of talent because of our failure to support them financially. So when it comes to retention of talent and brains, we need to support them financially adequately.
Thank you, Mr. Desrochers. I'm going to build on this, but I'm going to switch over to Dr. Bell. So, Dr. Bell, in your remarks, you indicated that once we lose people, it's hard to get them back. So, am I to understand that if we can keep people here at the early stages of the career, if we can make their career opportunities more robust, that we're more likely to keep them, more likely to build on them?
I think that's certainly the case with many scientists who go abroad. It's simply the fact that you set up a new life in a different country, then you become static, and it becomes much more difficult to reintegrate into the system. The Canadian scientific community is much different from the American scientific community or the European scientific community, and to a large extent, it makes it very difficult to re-enter that world once you've left it.
So obviously funding is important, but because people have to be able to pay the bills. But you mentioned that the thing that attracts talent most effectively is good science, not necessarily money. So go ahead.
So yeah, by money, I think what I was referring to was not so much salary, although obviously that's always attractive to have a nice salary. But I think what attracts scientists most is to have the funding opportunities for their research, to be able to excel to their potential.
I guess this goes. I keep asking this question on all of our panels. One of the things you mentioned is important is discovery science and innovation. And it seems to me, perhaps from your experience on NSERC, that one of the problems there is how do you identify research that's worth funding? because, you know, fundamental science, discovery science doesn't necessarily look like it's going to amount to anything from the outset. So perhaps you could address that concern as well.
I think that's very difficult to predict. And I think if you look at the history of it, if you were trying to predict what the cutting edge of science would be today, if you're doing that 10 years ago, then very few people would have been able to predict what the research was going to look like. And I think that's difficult for scientists to do, and it's even more difficult for governments to do. And so clearly you need to make some decisions about where the funding should be allocated, and I think it's worthwhile to allocate some of that money towards innovating technologies rather than just discovery science, but trying to predict which science will create those technologies is often a losing game.
I'll switch over to Dr. Wolf, I think. I think this all ties into, you mentioned the importance of having a deep pool of talent and skilled labor. I expect that means that having a robust body of postgrads and so forth, would that be part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. The labor market that I'm referring to, that is created by the graduates of all of our post-secondary institutions, from the community colleges through the polytechnics to the universities. And it comes through all levels of graduate education, from bachelor's through master's to doctorates. All of those graduates feed into the local labor market. They don't always necessarily stay in the metropolitan area where they were educated, but what we've been finding in recent research
Professor Wolf, I'm so sorry. That's the end of the 6 minutes. This is really hard, and I've done it to you twice. My apologies. Je veux passer la...
I'd now like to hand the floor over to Mr. Blanchette Jean-Cad for his turn. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'd like to welcome the witnesses and my colleagues who are here today. My first question is for Mr. Desroches. Mr. Desroches, your speech was very clear. Right off the bat, you shed a lot of light on this situation and made your demands. My understanding is that we do have talent in Canada, particularly in Quebec, and we need to lay down the groundwork so that they can succeed. And one of the prerequisites is funding. You referred to this amount of money. This amount was cut. There's been reinvestment since 2019, but it's been inadequate to catch up with the shortfall that developed prior to 2019. So do you believe that the reinvestment since 2019 has been adequate? Response. Thank you very much for the question. And to give you a bit of background, there were cutbacks in 2015, 2019, then there was a reinvestment in research, but not for student scholarships. And it's hard to understand why these student programs were subjected to cutbacks, unlike other areas. Why these bursaries weren't funded. So in 2019, indeed, the situation was in part corrected. However, there is still a shortfall to bring us back to the pre-cutback levels of 2011. And the idea here is to ensure that students who do meet criteria of excellence receive federal funding. And those granting organisations, federal granting organisations, have set out criteria, and when students meet those criteria and still they're not funded, well, that's very unfortunate, because these can be high-caliber workers at the end of the day. Thank you, Mr. Desroches. For what I understand of your analysis, the plight of students, well, is it better today than it was previously in Canada? Response. Absolutely not. It's not a better situation. We have our work cut out for us when it comes to the duration of scholarships, also the amount of these scholarships. As I said in my remarks, it's been stagnant for about 2 decades for research bursaries, for granting organisations, especially given the cost of life has risen over the past 20 years. Could you elaborate on the inadequate duration of these bursaries, masters, doctorates? What about studies on retention of talent? What is the upshot of this brain drain and the stress that this places on the shoulders of graduate and postgraduate students? Response. Well, I'd remind you that the Naylor report put its finger on this particular sore point. We need to invest in students over many years. Unfortunately, when they reach the end of their doctorate, because the bursary doesn't match up with the real length of their studies, they lose their main source of funding and have to stop working on their doctorate or their research, or at least stop focusing on it, because doctoral students, of course, have to write scientific articles and have done so for many years now. By themselves, moreover. So often those students lose the focus on their doctoral thesis itself, which extends their graduation period. And when that occurs, well, that means that it costs more for the student and to get their degree. Well, you referred to the doctorates, but what about masters? What about funding in that area? Well, master's scholarships last 1 year for many granting bodies. Now, there has been a response to the Naylor report and some improvement has been made. Another recommendation, in 2014, Quebec has guaranteed certain places for certain doctoral and master's graduates. In your opinion, is the career path of students being really factored in? Well, response. Currently, federally, not really. And these federal funding organisations do fund research and they do support students, but there is no place or any forum for these students to have any input in their future. So the granting organisations need more consultation, especially in the research field. Ideas need to be stimulated. Thank you very much. Mr. Desroches, earlier colleagues referred to the need for investment, and obviously this is a budgetary issue. Do you have any recommendations concerning the budget? Should the government try to innovate by reinvesting in budget in these bursaries? Well, thank you very much for the question. These super scholarships, which are of $50,000 over a three-year period, we would suggest to reduce the amounts of these super bursaries in order to have more scholarships in the amount of $35,000 for doctorates and postgraduate studies. There's been a study on this issue, in fact. I'm very sorry to cut you off.
Monsieur Blanchet-Shankar,
Mr. Blanchet-Shankar, yes, we'll take the answers in writing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you both. Thank you both. And tonight we're delighted to welcome Ms. Gazan to the committee. The floor is yours for 6 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I'm very happy to be part of this committee as a longtime post-secondary educator at both the Polytechnique level, but also the university level. So this is certainly near and dear to my heart. My first question is for Mr. Bell. You spoke about reasons why academics leave universities. One of the criticisms of academic institutions, certainly in Canada, is that they have replaced, for example, tenured professorships with stipend positions. Like academia has almost become a career path of poverty for these highly specialized, highly educated individuals in Canada. Would you agree with my assessment that we need to make sure that positions that are offered in universities are less precarious so that we can retain top-notch academics in Canada?
I would definitely agree. Tenured positions are the linchpin of the university system. It's only with tenured positions that you can ensure that you can get the best scientists. As mentioned, you're competing for these scientists with other countries, and I think if tenured positions become lacking, then they'll go to other places. I know that increasingly many university positions within Canada rely on soft money, on bringing in the grant income. And if you don't bring in the grant income, well, then your position goes away. I think that's following that trajectory would be a mistake.
And just following up on that, what changes do you think should be made to overhaul the system so that scholars want to do their research and continue their studies in Canada and contribute to solving major crises that we face? We often, I think, separate what we're doing in universities from what's happening on the ground when universities and polytechniques really lead the way in solutions across the country. Can you recommend some changes to the granting system?
To the granting system, that's a very difficult and complicated question. I'm not sure that I'm sufficiently expert in that area to make a very detailed comment. But I should note that the granting system is very, very different in Canada from the US or from Europe. The money is spread much more thinly among many more people. And this can also be a barrier to bringing top scientists into the country. The opportunity for large grants to do the most exciting research is often limiting within Canada.
Thank you so much. Just moving on to Mr. Wolf. When you look at the granting of research dollars by federal government, one of the criticisms that is common for polytechniques is that they currently get 5% of all research dollars, where universities get the lion's share at 95%. We know that polytechniques do a lot of, like research with partnerships with, for example, companies that are currently in the process of trying to innovate new technologies. Would you agree that the current granting system between polytechniques and universities needs to be a little bit more equitable? And if yes or no, and your opinions on that?
I'm not going to say yes, because I'm employed by the largest university in the country, so that's a bit of a loaded question. I will reinterpret it slightly with your permission.
Sure.
There have been a number of very innovative programs introduced at NSERC at the federal level. Ontario had one. They were targeted at community colleges. I think some were targeted at the polytechnics. I think we need to look at, when we think of university interaction with industry and firms, we need to look at it as part of a continuum. Collaboration on basic fundamental research, the kind that Dr. Bell's been talking about, is at one end. The kind of more applied incremental innovation that goes on, that people from the community colleges or the polytechnics can work with firms on, is at the other end. We need to look at the entire spectrum. And I think it's a mistake to say, well, there's only one pot of money for basic fundamental or discovery research, and we've got to allocate that to all of the post-secondary institutions. I think we need to look at the different roles that those institutions play in supporting innovation and ask ourselves the question, do we have the appropriate mix of policies targeted at the role that the different post-secondary institutions can play in making sure they're adequately funded? The other thing we need to, that I've long said, is we need to switch the flip the switch a little bit on how we look at that relationship. We tend to look at have a supply push model of research results. In other words, we fund the fundamental research in the universities, and then we think in terms of how to push that out into private firms. But if you talk to private firms, they often will say, I have this technical problem I'm trying to solve. I'm sure there's someone in my local college or polytechnic or community who can help me solve it. I don't know where to go to find the solution. So we need to also be thinking in terms of what are the appropriate demand pull mechanisms to help pull the available scientific knowledge or technical expertise out of the post-secondary institutions and put it to work assisting firms who are trying to solve concrete technical problems.
I thank you for your grace in answering my question in the way that you needed to answer, and I really appreciated your response.
And
my
Ms. Gazan,
oh no,
I am sorry, and I appreciated
okay.
I appreciated your grace. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
And now we're going to go to the 5-minute round, and we're pleased to welcome tonight Monsieur Lehoux. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and thank you for welcoming me to your committee this evening, and particular thanks to the witnesses for being here. My first question will be for Mr. Desroches. Mr. Desroches, you referred to the fact that these boards of directors do have some student presence on them. I'd like you to elaborate on that, please, and tell us what your experience of that is and what it means concretely. Response. Well, thank you very much for the question. The Quebec chief scientists and provincial boards have felt that it's important to have student voices on these granting bodies so that they bring the points of view of students forward, their concerns, their misgivings when it comes to bursaries and scholarships. Now, when funding is given to federal granting bodies, well, then there are individuals who systematically ensure that a part of that funding is for masters and doctoral students, for the new blood, as it were. Now, if we could take an example of the Quebec chief scientists, well, in Canada there is a youth council, and that youth council or that youth advisor could be used to select people for boards of directors for these federal granting bodies. Question. It's my understanding that you raised the issue of legislation in your question. Do you believe, therefore, that the federal government needs to amend certain pieces of legislation to achieve what you're asking for? Well, there's CIHI, NSERC and the SHRC. Under the legislation, their mandates are defined clearly, and perhaps that needs to be amended. Question. Earlier, you referred, when it comes to funding, to slight improvement, but you also alluded to the importance of indexation, which we haven't seen, if my understanding is correct, over the past number of years. Response. Yes, research scholarships are fixed amounts, they're not indexed, and they haven't, in fact, been increased for a good many years. So therefore, over time, the value of scholarships has dropped. And a $20,000 scholarship in Quebec doesn't necessarily equate a $20,000 scholarship elsewhere in Canada where the cost of living is different. Thank you very much. A question for Mr. Bell now, if I may. Mr. Bell, there are major obstacles to attracting and retaining talent, but what I'd like to hear from you is, outside the major metropolises, what role can the federal government play to become more attractive and to improve the whole retention issue when it comes to keeping talent outside major metropolises as well?
So thank you for the question. I think the key is always that the science attracts the science. So if you want to attract scientists outside of the metropolises, then you need to create the centers of innovation there. So that may mean setting up centers of excellence at locations where you'd like to set them up. I don't think that scientists are distracted by the particular location. Lots of very prominent universities are in very odd places around the world. The main thing is that you need to set up a place where it's beneficial to do your science.
Professor Bell, I'm sorry to interrupt. Monsieur Liu, merci.
Thank you very much.
And now we will go to Monsieur Lauzon for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'd really like to thank our three witnesses, Mr. Bell, Mr. Desroches, and Mr. Wolfe, for their attendance today. My first question will be for you, Mr. Wolfe, Professor of Political Science, University of Toronto. In 2018, in a report creating opportunities for Canada, and what picked my attention was on page 31 of the report. You stated that the federal government put in place over 95 or 90 programs. And in your opinion, investments made in Canadian businesses that contributed to the training and retention of talent in our school institutions. I'd like to hear what the impact was on that, i.e. the point in your report. And could you share that with the committee, please?
Sorry, I missed the title. You cut out when you said the title of the report, so I need to hear the title.
So you've been part of the report Creating Digital Opportunity for Canada in 2015,
that was my
2016?
research project that I led, yes.
Yeah, and you said that in this report at the page 31 that it was a very important that investment you made, that we made as a federal government about the Canadian enterprise, the contributions for the retention of the for the school, and how it is important for you. Can you speak a little bit about this?
Well, I don't have the report in front of me, so you've got me at a disadvantage. I think I was making the same point: is that both the other witnesses have made a similar point. You need to fund the science. You need to fund the post-secondary education. You need to fund the students. You make sure the students are funded at all levels through the post-secondary system in order to create the deep talent pool of technical talent. We're living in an age, what's increasingly being defined as an intangible economy that runs on data, on intellectual property, on branding, on marketing, and the intangibles are based on people with the ability to understand the talent, to create the IP, to do the research, and to analyze the data. I've been studying these areas for over 20 years. I worked in government 30 years ago. The world has shifted dramatically in the past 30 years. And the talent was important then. It's 10 times more important now. And if we don't fund and support and nurture that talent and put them out into the local labor markets, we don't have the base either to grow our own domestic firms, and we don't have the base to attract other firms into our regions. And that was the point, the fundamental point that I think I was trying to make in that report.
I have another question. I don't know if you can hear me through the interpretation service, but as a teacher at university, I'm not sure how connected you are to the whole issue of funding, but Mr. Desroches mentioned underfunding on a number of occasions for students. Now, there's a balance to be struck between funding programs and funding students, isn't there? Especially if you make cutbacks to programs to give more money to students, what would be the impact on universities? And you're in university, and what would be the best way to fund students themselves?
Well, Mr. Desroches could speak to Quebec. I'm not qualified to do that. I can speak to Ontario. The reality is that going back to the ending of the block funding formula from the federal government to the provinces in 1995, the federal share of funding that is going to post-secondary institutions has declined steadily for 25 years. The associations and universities and colleges of Canada have called for the introduction of some form of a block funding formula dedicated to post-secondary institutions. At my university, if I'm not mistaken, the level of public funding at the moment is about 25% of the total operational cost of the university. The rest comes from tuitions, comes from external research grants, it comes from philanthropy. It's not coming from the public sector, and very little of that 25% is coming from the federal government. So if the federal government is truly worried about how post-secondary education is being financed in this country and how affordable it is for students at all levels, then they need to take a long, hard look at how the shared cost formulas between the federal government and the provinces have changed over the last 27 years, because the net result of that change has been a decline in the share of federal transfers that actually end up supporting post-secondary education.
Thanks for the answer.
Thank
you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Lauzon and Professor Wolf. We will now go to the last round, and it'll be for 2.5 minutes. And we will start with Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Desroches, coming back to the point of scholarships, 125,000 scholarships for super talent. These are students from abroad. What would be your recommendation when it comes to, at the very least, funding students domestically with some of that money? Well, to increase accessibility and to fund as many individuals as possible with the pool of money available, our suggestion would be that the super scholarships, like the Valley bursaries, be reduced to $35,000 so that funding can be spread among more students. And we've based this on studies that have demonstrated, studies conducted by the University of Montreal, that indicate that students, when they get a little more money, won't produce more research with that extra little bit of more money. And so it's more optimal to give that money to other students. Question, you've looked at how to make up this shortfall when it comes to student bursaries. I know that it's difficult to get concrete data for the funding bodies. Well, yes, we specifically focused on data of the 3 federal funding granting organisations' annual reports, and it has been difficult to get good data. We haven't seen a full picture, and in the absence of data, we can't determine whether there is a problem with funding. So first, we need better data so that we can determine the number of applications, the number of scholarships offered, and see how accessibility to research bursaries develops. Final question. The number of researchers in Canada has dropped over the years. It's the only G7 country that has seen a drop in the number of researchers, and there's a correlation with economic development. In 2001-2009, Canada went from 11th to 9th in terms of ranking on the world stage. What's your opinion? Well, I'll refer back to my opening remarks. We need to support talent of students in graduate and postgraduate studies already in the country. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Is there any time left?
Wow. Excellent.
Right on time, Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca. And now we will go to Ms. Gazin for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. And my questions are for Mr. Desroches, or Desroches. Is it Desroches? Is that right? Desroches. Okay. When I was teaching at university, I didn't lose a lot of students due to academic issues. I actually lost a lot of students to poverty and being unable to afford their studies. Some of the brightest minds in my classrooms, and it was tragic. You've, of course, talked a little bit about the need for better funding for students. One of the things that I've been fighting for is a guaranteed livable basic income, including for students, so that students could focus on their studies and be the best in their fields. Do you think a guaranteed livable basic income would assist students in being able to focus on their studies? I believe that if you have the time to focus on your studies, you become the best of the best. You get the best of the best in the fields.
Ici, en fait,
Well, it's for that precise reason that when it comes to research scholarships under federal jurisdiction and the 3 federal granting bodies, that we've suggested an increase in funding to support students for the very point that you've just made. You've hit the nail on the head. Someone who doesn't get funding has to do odd jobs on the side, and therefore their doctoral studies and research suffers as a consequence, and that individual, therefore, as a result, doesn't produce top-notch scientific publications and articles whilst they're doing their doctoral studies.
Thank you for your response, and just and I absolutely agree with your assessment. I also agree that part of the issue is that there's a lack of student input, that decisions are made on behalf of students in the absence of student voices who are really living the experience. Why do you feel, or do you feel it's important for students to be part of decision making, or having part of any sort of decision concerning things related to budgeting or delivering grants?
la science est basée sur...
Well, science is based on a confrontation of ideas, and students can bring fresh new ideas in certain fora, including the administration of the bursaries themselves.
Je suis désolée.
I'm sorry that you've run out of time.
Dear colleagues, we all want to thank the witnesses for your time, your effort, and your expertise. We are grateful that you've taken the time. And Professor Bell, we do recognize the hour this is. We hope you've had a good experience, and thank you. We will briefly suspend as we get ready to go to our second panel. Suspended.
Thank you.
Colleagues, I will welcome you back for panel 2 of this second study of this inaugural committee. We'd like to begin by welcoming our witnesses. We are so glad you've joined us, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. You have a committee who's really interested in your work. So tonight for the second panel, we have Cherie Bresnitz, Associate Professor, Munk School of Global Affairs, the University of Toronto. From Dalhousie University, we have Alice Aiken, Vice President, Research and Innovation. From the Université du Québec, we have Etienne Carbonneau, Executive Advisor, Governmental Relations, and Céline Poncelin de Rocheur, Vice President, Teaching and Research. We're going to hear from each of you for 5 minutes. At the 4.5-minute mark, you'll see me lift a yellow card. That means you have 30 seconds left, and we look forward to your testimony. We will begin with Professor Bresnitz. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Dear members of the Committee on Science and Research, my name is Cherie Bresnitz. I'm an associate professor at the Munk School, and I will focus my statement on the importance of entrepreneurship education and the role of international education in entrepreneurship. Policymakers have long viewed universities as significant contributors to entrepreneurship, job creation, and economic growth. In recent years, many studies have examined the impact of firms started by students and graduates. In the US, studies find that universities' major impact is in the form of startups created by students rather than faculty. For that, we need entrepreneurs. So first, I would like to discuss the importance of entrepreneurship education. Studies indicate the importance of small and medium-sized enterprises to a successful innovative economy. Here is where entrepreneurship education becomes an important tool. Our research finds that in comparison to no entrepreneurship education at all, entrepreneurship education courses do have a positive impact on entrepreneurship in general, but especially on student entrepreneurship. In addition, a combination of entrepreneurship education from different organizations, such as government agencies, incubators, accelerators, and universities, promote the establishment of high technology firms. So not just any business, but high technology business. So on the policy level, this means that we need government to support a variety of entrepreneurship support organizations that teach entrepreneurship and support entrepreneurs. Second, I would like to highlight that while STEM education is important for technology-based workforce, it does not increase the number of startups or firms. Studies debate the importance of STEM education for entrepreneurship. My work indicates a positive relationship between a non-STEM degree and entrepreneurship activity. No matter how we define entrepreneurship, STEM graduates do not outperform their counterparts who have only non-STEM degrees. That said, we also found that having both types of degrees is positive for entrepreneurial activity. It is assumed that by studying both STEM and non-STEM subjects, graduate students will learn more diverse knowledge and skills. The important takeaway from this is that an overemphasis on STEM workforce may not lead to a higher rate of entrepreneurship. Third, I would like to discuss the importance of international education and international employment on entrepreneurship. Many studies show that foreign students are more entrepreneurial than domestic students. Our study examining U of T alumni support these studies and find outperformance among students with foreign education in experience in creating startups. However, we find that irrespective of their country of origins, students who have earned any foreign degree, this includes not only non-Canadian students who come to Canada, but actually Canadians who pursue higher education outside Canada are more likely to become entrepreneurs. Education is just one aspect of international experience, which could also involve working in a foreign country. Hence, we analyze also the differences between international education and international employment. as well as the impact of having both experiences on entrepreneurship. Our empirical research show that international education experience matters more. So education matters more to entrepreneurship than international employment experience. When we break down the analysis and we examine the subject studied by students, the international experience seems to be more important than the subject studies or the degree obtained. And it doesn't matter what students studied abroad. The experience of international education has a positive impact on entrepreneurship. For policy makers, the important takeaway here is to pay attention to domestic students who have obtained academic degrees outside their home countries and even create programs to support international education. Many countries such as China, India, Spain, and New Zealand have introduced policies to induce skilled workers to return to their country of origin. Canada should consider similar policies. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Associate Professor Bresnitz. We appreciate this. And now we will go to Vice President Research and Innovation, Alice Aitken, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you for your invitation to represent Dalhousie University here today to discuss the opportunities we have as a nation to attract and retain top research talent at our post-secondary institutions. To address this pressing issue, we need to ask what incentives are required to attract the world's thought leaders to pursue made in Canada research and innovation, and what investments are needed to ensure that they stay in Canada to train the next generation of researchers and innovators. The good news is that Canada has already made a lot of ground attracting and keeping talent. The Canada Research Chair, CRC, and Canada Excellence Research Chair, CERC programs have had a considerable impact. We were encouraged by the pledge to create 1,000 new CRCs in the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry's most recent mandate letter. And the funding for up to 25 new CERCs in the 2022 budget was also certainly welcome. However, this encouragement is tempered by the fact that Canada is well behind many other OECD countries in the percentage of GDP we invest in research. And several of these countries are assertively increasing their investments in research. Our competition is ramping up. When it's time for the world's leading research talent to decide which country will empower them to reach their full potential, how can we ensure that Canada is their choice? Before we consider this, let's first consider what the CERC and CRC programs have already accomplished, because there is a lot to celebrate. For instance, just last week, the Nova Scotia-based company Planetary Technology won a $1 million X Prize finalist prize from the Musk Foundation for their innovation that uses the ocean to capture carbon from the atmosphere. Their goal is to remove 1 gigaton of carbon every year. This is a remarkable goal. What gives them the confidence that they can achieve it? Well, they're powered by a research partnership with Dalhousie, led by CERC Emeritus and current CRC, Dr. Doug Wallace, and the researchers that he has helped attract to the university from all over the world. Technology like this is putting Atlantic Canada on the leading edge of ocean carbon capture and storage, and it would not be happening without Canada's CERC investment that attracted Dr. Wallace to Canada. Another example, nearly 40 years ago, Dalhousie's Dr. Jeff Don, a Tier 1 CRC, for nearly 40 years, he's been a global leader in advancing the science and technology of lithium-ion batteries. His research has made lithium-ion batteries the preferred power source for portable electronic devices, electric vehicles, and more. How have we kept him at Dalhousie? The CRC program has played a fundamental role, and the ripple effect has been tremendous. Dr. Don's research lab has generated 2 spin-off companies, including Halifax-based Novonix, which recently celebrated its listing on the NASDAQ. More importantly, Dr. Don's work has attracted other top researchers and a whole new generation of graduate students from around the world to Canada. When you invest in top talent, the benefits are far-reaching in terms of the research and innovations delivered and the HQP trained. How can we ensure that we do not lose ground? Well, CRCs and CERCs help attract talent. However, the value of the CRCs has not increased over time and has in fact decreased relative to programs offered by our competitor countries. To ensure we continue to attract the very best research, our per chair investments need to increase. And to attract top talent, whether to fill chairs or not, Canada needs to ensure we have robust funding programs in place to support the groundbreaking research they want to pursue. This means investing in our federal granting agencies. With the Naylor investment, CIHR, SSHRC, and NSERC had just caught up to their international counterparts after being underfunded for many years. But there hasn't been any new money for investigator-driven research in the last two budgets or to sustain growth in our granting agencies. We can't afford to remain idle or we will fall behind again. We also need to ensure that we have the infrastructure, equipment, and personnel to support researchers with world-class ambitions. This means investing in our research environments and the upkeep and management of this important research infrastructure. Because in research, the famed cinematic quote holds true. If we build it, they will come. Thank you again for having me here today. It's been my great pleasure to share successes and discuss opportunities, and I'm looking forward to addressing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aiken. We will now go to the Université du Québec. Will it be Vice President Céline Poncelin de Recourt speaking? Welcome. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Yes, indeed. Welcome. Well, thank you very much for welcoming me to this working session of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. I am Céline Poncelin de Recourt, Vice President of Teaching and Research at the Université du Québec, a collaborative network of 10 institutions that is open to the world and rich in its diversity. Today, the committee is addressing two distinct but interrelated issues, attracting talent and supporting research. Let's begin by reminding you, Madam Chair, that students, researchers and professional staff in universities are an exceptional pool of highly qualified personnel. They support the innovation required for a green and resilient economy. Whether in universities, industry, or organizations in general, these people are able to generate or mobilize the knowledge required to provide innovative solutions to complex problems. While they contribute to Canada's global reach, these highly qualified people are also essential to providing appropriate responses when global issues come to bear in the challenges faced by our communities at the local or regional level. Highly qualified personnel, however, are in short supply. That is why we are looking for talent. And I would like to point out to the members of this committee that a very significant portion of the talent that Canada needs and that we wish to attract and retain can be found closer than one might think. Canada's potential is indeed great. You know as well as we do, Madam Chair, that in Canada, according to the OECD, only 34% of 25 to 34-year-olds have a university degree. This is almost 15 percentage points behind the champions in this field. But rather than just looking at the gap, we suggest you look at the opportunity. There is a real and tremendous Canadian potential for growth in highly qualified people. A truly transformative approach to attracting and retaining talent would be to develop and support homegrown talent. This choice would be a win-win since these people are already rooted in our communities and this reduces the problem of retention. In other words, and this is the main message of our testimony today, Canada has an immense pool of resources present across our vast land in which we can choose to invest. To do so, Canada must mobilise all Canadian universities, including those that are small or medium-sized or located outside the country's major urban centres. The special ties between universities and the communities in which they are located and the access to higher education that they facilitate for the population of their cities and regions are very important assets for the development of talent and science in Canada. The Université du Québec network is living proof of this, and I'll be able to give you a few examples during the discussion that follows. The transformative potential of the talent we are developing is all the greater because our universities are training the next generation of researchers in and through research. Certainly the research done in Canada has a real international scope, but in addition, the research done in the majority of Canadian institutions also embodies scientific themes that are crucial to the communities that make up Canada. At the Université du Québec, for example, our researchers excel in areas such as coastal erosion and climate change, suicide prevention in northern communities, artificial intelligence in the mining sector, development of wood products, Aboriginal knowledge, and rural healthcare, for example. Now, in both of these respects, training of highly qualified personnel and research, we have an immense capacity with some 100 active universities across Canada. Yet, for several years, we have seen an imbalance in investments in science and research that affects this capacity. Indeed, while the Granting Council's budgets have stagnated, funding programs offering a very limited number of grants, often of very high value for very targeted themes, have been launched in recent years. These grants have benefited very few individuals and institutions. Therefore, year after year, 10% of Canada's researchers share between 50 and 80% of public research funding, depending on the field. This type of science policy, the limitations of which were clearly identified in the Naylor report, has an immediate effect on the capacity of several dozen universities. It hinders thousands of researchers who are able to participate fully in the development of research and of science. While a few large cities or institutions capture the majority of resources, this situation has a real effect on the development of regional territories and populations. Their ability to attract and develop talent is also diminished. We are concerned, Madam Chair, that this will have a long-term effect on our collective ability to master the many challenges that affect all sectors and all regions of the country. We therefore propose to revise this approach to invest in programs that are based on three main principles. Number one, developing the potential of talent where it is found across the country. Two, supporting this potential early in the life of students by providing them with opportunities to engage in the world of research as early as the undergraduate level. And third, ensuring that all sectors of activity across the country can rely on highly qualified personnel whose scientific culture is essential to the transformation required to face the challenges of tomorrow.
For joining us tonight. And now we are going to go to questions. I know our members are eager to learn from you. You have a really committed group here. And we will start with the 6-minute rounds. And we will begin with Monsieur Liu. The floor is yours. 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes, sir. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. My first question is directed at Ms. Raucourt, if I may. Ms. Raucourt, you alluded to a number of issues, and I'd like to come back to a number of them, i.e. that we have a lot of talent already in Canada, and that we are not optimizing this talent. Moreover, this talent isn't spread out across the regions of Canada. I'd like you to elaborate on that particular issue, if you would, please, Ms. Poncelin de Raucourt. Response. Well, indeed, in the experience of the Université du Québec, this network was created to promote accessibility to postgraduate studies, now setting aside geographical obstacles which limits access to postgraduate studies. A number of years ago, a statistician in the federal government demonstrated that there was a particular issue when individuals were over 70 kilometres away from universities and they didn't go to those universities to study. There are some regions with lower levels of education, and one of the decisive factors when it comes to attending postgraduate and graduate studies, far above household income, is the fact that these parents of these children had gone to colleges or universities themselves. So in the institutions in our network, in some of them, about 60% of our students are what we call first-generation students. Now, the fact that there are universities, fully fledged universities that engage in research and training across the country, well, that will help us to guarantee that we capture the talent where it is found, because these folks tend to underestimate their own value. Thank you very much. Now, you mentioned also the issue of grants, that they need to be better and more equitably distributed and more appropriately used. Do you have any suggestions to make to the committee on that particular issue? Response. Indeed, the message we're trying to get through is to focus on how the funding is concentrated. And we've seen this recently. Even though it was a good thing in the pandemic, there was significant investments made that focused on institutions engaging in medical research, which led to a further concentration of or over-concentration of funding. And there's been research on the effects of the pandemic on aspects other than medical aspects, such as mental health, adapting to local ecosystems, and that research investment wasn't necessarily conducted recently. There are about 15 universities in Canada that share about 75% of federal funding. We need to be able to invest in poles of excellence. We are far from being against that idea. We need to ensure that the ecosystem is a living, organic one so that we can equitably distribute the funding capacity across Canada. And as I said, if there is greater funding capacity that attracts talent regionally, and there's a greater ability to innovate because researchers understand things at a grassroots level. Well, I'd like to come back to that point and hone in on that, if I may. If we do things at a more grassroots community level, we will be better positioned to respond to the challenges that face us, and that those students will be able, the contribution those students will be able to make. So the regional focus is important. Of course, I understand the importance of pure research, but applying that out in the field is all the more important. I'd like your thoughts on that. Well, indeed, you've hit the nail on the head. There are university centres that are being developed thanks to partnerships with the communities. There are maritime or coastal communities or mining communities where the research is focusing on local grassroots activities. And of course, research goes beyond local realities and attracts new sectors of activity. And the upshot of that is a diversification of an economic activity in those areas. And that fosters creativity in terms of research and new areas of expertise and excellence in regions that are not just major urban centres. How much time do I have, Madam Chair? Madam Chair? Well, thank you very much, Ms. Poncelin-Raucourt, and I hope that we'll have an opportunity to delve deeper into your ideas and make a number of recommendations based on what you have raised, especially when it comes to Canada's regions.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Leroux. And we're really happy you've joined us tonight. We'll now go to Ms. Diab for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. And if I may, I'd like to thank all of our witnesses this evening.
Much for all our witnesses tonight as we continue our study on top talent research and innovation. For me, as an East Coaster and as an MP for Halifax West, I'm always really pleased and happy to see somebody from Nova Scotia and from Atlantic Canada to take part of these discussions. So tonight, Dr. Aiken, I thank you very much for appearing with us tonight. And let me first acknowledge your service with the forces and your long record of support to our veterans and service members. Thank you very much for that. Let me just begin by saying it's not a secret that in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada, we have some of our most aging population. Particularly, can you tell us if that would be true of the community of scientists and researcher as well from your perspective? And I guess then I would ask is, how do we ensure we attract and retain the best and brightest? Do we have enough in domestic supply? How do we ensure that the ones that we do have in Canada, that we actually keep them in Canada? Because we heard in our previous testimony that it's always, and that is, those are facts, that it's always more expensive and it costs more to the researcher, to anybody coming from outside Canada to sort of get to know our system, how to deal with it, than to sort of build on the successes of people that are already here. But then the follow-up is, do we have enough here? How do we do that? And how do we then go and search for international students and for the brightest internationally? And just from your experience and from Dalhousie and East Coast.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Ms. Diab. I'm also thrilled to be here. And while Nova Scotia does have a disproportionately aging population compared to many other provinces, I wouldn't say that's true of the professoriate in our post-secondary sector. As you know, we have 10 universities and the community college, and we are able to attract and retain a lot of talent. And in fact, Nova Scotia, Halifax in particular, is in one of the top 10 cities in North America for post-secondary educated personnel. So proportion of population who are post-secondary educated, we're in the top 10 in North America. So I do actually think we produce a lot of talent. And while Dalhousie attracts a lot of students from outside the province, many of the other universities attract more people from within the province, and we are tending to grow a lot of our own talent. That said, people do travel across Canada and around the world. And how do we attract and retain top talent is a great question. Part of it is the ecosystem. There's something very attractive about the research ecosystem in Canada, in that, unlike the US, we don't pay ourselves. Professors don't pay ourselves out of our research grants. So it actually costs less to do the same amount of research here because you're not paying all the professors who are part of the research grant. It costs less to do research here than it does in the US. And so, we're often able to attract big grants from the US as well to do research here. So that's one very attractive thing about Canada. And it is, a lot of US professors find it very attractive. They actually have to find part of their salary through their grants. And in Canada, we generally do not. Professors are generally salaried. And so it's an attractive environment from that perspective. And you are correct. Moving to a new ecosystem for research can be very, very difficult and a steep learning curve if you're not familiar with it. So I think Canadian researchers want to stay in Canada. We know that Canadian students want to stay in Canada. In fact, we have a problem with them not wanting to go and do placements internationally because we live in a good, safe country. And I think ever more right now that is important. And I do believe we have the right environment to keep our researchers here, but we need to have the money for them to be able to pursue their interests. We really do. That is what it comes down to quite critically.
Thank you very much for that, and really appreciate for my colleagues on the panel. We don't often have somebody coming from Nova Scotia or East Canada, so appreciate getting that perspective and from you. And you're right. For a province of 1 million people, we have 10 universities in Nova Scotia. And a Nova Scotia community college that has 13 campuses. And I know that full well, having been the Minister of Advanced Education when I did my provincial role. I also know that Nova Scotia has been very active in attracting and retaining international students. And as well, quite frankly, we don't have to do much, but we've been attracting a lot of students from within Canada as well. And of course, Dalhousie has been a very big recipient of that, of of all the good things that is happening. What proportion would you say at Dalhousie or in our that we would attract students or researchers, I guess, from within Canada? We're done, are we?
You are done, I'm afraid. Might you want to ask Dr. Aiken if she wants to table an answer?
Sure. If there's any information that you'd like to supply us that we don't have time today, we would love to have it sent to us. Thank you.
Happy
to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Diab. We will now go to Monsieur Blanchette-Chancave for 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to welcome the witnesses this evening. My questions will be for Ms. Poncelin de Recourt. You talked about the Université du Québec network, the biggest network in Canada. How can those university networks develop talent in Canada? Response. Well, excellent question. As I mentioned previously, having universities in local communities is a very good way of attracting young people and people in the workforce to come back to their studies to develop their talent, and it enables them to do so. Earlier, I referred to the population of students whose parents never went to university themselves. And the very existence of those institutions is therefore important. Now, when you get training in a particular regional area, that has an effect on retention of highly qualified staff in that area. I could back that up with some figures. About 30% of our students, we have 100,000 across the Université du Québec network, 30% of those students told us that they would never have gone to university had there not been a university in their locality. And when we look at the data on graduates, it demonstrates that those that studied in their region usually can move forward with their career. Now, for example, in Trois-Rivières, Abitibi-Témiscamingue, we have universities, and 85% of the professionals they train remain and work in those regions. So training talent is thanks to the existence, the very existence of these universities. It's part of their mission statement, their research statement, and their statement to provide service communities. Thank you very much. There was something striking in your opening remarks, the concentration of funding. There needs to be a reinvestment in science and research, but we understand that the whole issue of redistribution is a shortcoming. A lot of researchers are taking the lion's share of funding. You talked about this over-concentration. Can you give us concrete examples? Absolutely. There are funds of excellence in research in Canada. There are a whole slew of funds which were developed with a view to having super investments in super clusters in special areas, but unfortunately, that creates an imbalance. So in addition to that investment, there needs to be genuine investment in the granting councils themselves that have the mechanisms to provide equity across all areas of research. Now, another figure that I'd like to mention, talent. Talent is students participating in research and training the next generation. These students get funding through scholarships, but also professors that hire these students. We conducted a study in 2019, and over 50% of students are trained in universities that only use a quarter of the resources allocated for research. So if we give the researchers the lion's share of funding, well, those students who aren't in the major metropolises will be able to take part in projects. Thank you. In 2021, about 15 Canadian universities shared between them over 72% of funding from granting bodies. We understand the imbalance you referred to, but when it comes to the functioning of research itself, are there other areas that this imbalance might affect? Well, yes, indeed. In addition to that, there's the ability of these institutions to provide a climate or an environment that is commensurate with effective research. Now, I said we want to develop and support talent across all of Canada. Universities need the means to achieve their ambitions, and the ecosystems need to support them. Research is an increasingly demanding field. Researchers need grants, and in order to obtain them, they have to demonstrate equity, diversity, national security concerns. it's becoming increasingly complicated to engage in research, and researchers have to respond to a number of requirements and exigencies in order to get their scholarships. And sometimes there are support teams for researchers that help them to fill out their applications to explain how they're going to meet those requirements. Now, when you're in an institution where there is less research funding, those teams that are there to support the researchers are fewer in number, and sometimes there are two people have to be jacks of all trades, and they're unfortunately, the resources are spread too thin. Therefore, this has become a major issue. And what's important in all of this is to ensure that there is funding to strengthen capacity. These granting councils have put in place programs that have enabled smaller universities to strengthen their capacity so that they can develop expertise in diversity and inclusion to better support researchers so that they can bring their research to bear. So there needs to be greater support there. That will be decisive so that we can have more research across Canada. Thank you.
C'était complet, Madame la Présidente.
I'm finished, Madam Chair. I've used my time up completely, I'm sure.
Yes, you did, my friend. Thank you, Monsieur Blanchet-Jacquat. We will now go, thank you to all our witnesses. We will now go to Ms. Gazan for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your testimony today. My first question is for Dr. Bresnitz. Could you please speak about the gendered impacts of limited funding to support entrepreneurs and researchers?
Sorry, I missed the beginning of your question.
Oh, sorry. Could you please speak about the gendered impacts of limiting funding and support for entrepreneurs and researchers?
So, I'm not sure I can answer that question, right? I don't. The impact on entrepreneurship itself, on entrepreneurship education, which was what I presented, we see there's still a difference, right? There's always been a difference between females and males in entrepreneurship. Usually, we see more males in entrepreneurship. But what we find is that actually, if we look at returnees to Canada who actually establish firms, we find more females, right? So on that level, you can see that the impact on entrepreneurship, and when we think about who we need to approach in order to recruit back, that would be more of a female entrepreneurs than male entrepreneurs.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Aiken, you serve as the vice chair for the Canadian Institute of Health Research. And I know one of the goals of your tri-agency on goals of the tri-agency on equity, diversity, and inclusion is to support equitable access to funding opportunities for all members of the research community. What are some of the key barriers to fully realizing this goal, and what are some initiatives that the federal government could take to support this goal better?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I am, and in fact, I'm currently the interim chair of the Governing Council of CIHR. CIHR was the first granting agency to declare that 4% of the funds would go to Indigenous researchers because 4% of the population of Canada are Indigenous. So they were the first ones to make that sort of equitable statement. And I believe that has worked very well. And it's not only 4, but minimum 4%. Yeah. And then we just saw in the last budget money for specifically for Black researchers, Black Canadian researchers. And I believe it was 24 million, but you would know better than I. So I think those are some of the measures that can be taken, is actually having population-based targets for research funding. Where I think we still struggle as a country, and it's nobody's fault, but we saw it during the pandemic, that women were really disproportionately affected in all areas. But really, in research, it was quite astonishing. The number of publications of women, the number of publications submitted by women researchers dropped, and the number of publications submitted by male researchers skyrocketed. And that's true in most disciplines. The number of grant applications we saw from women was substantially reduced. The number from men increased. And so, I think that while we thought we were making good strides as a country generally, that really shone a light on areas where we perhaps aren't as equitable as we think we are. And I would love to have that answer for you. I don't, but I do think it is something that we as a country really need to come to terms with.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. The other question I have for you is related to foreign academic credentials. Something that's in terms of credentialing and accepting foreign credentials is a huge issue in my riding that I represent. What do you think the federal government could do to ensure that foreign academic credentials can be made more transferable to Canadian industries and needs, and ensure that the job market is more attractive to recruit researchers and innovators?
Yeah, it's a great question. I certainly think if we were talking sort of PhDs and straight researchers, people know the institutions, and I don't think that that's if somebody has a PhD from another country, we know the institution, it's accepted. So it's interesting to me that professional degrees, MDs, engineering, those kind of degrees aren't immediately accepted, and that we have, obviously each country has its standards, and in Canada each province has its standards that we have to meet for professional accreditation. But it really should be much faster. We're a country of immigrants, right? I mean, aside from First Nations, we are all immigrants at some point. So I do believe that this is an area that we could really work on to improve professional employment and entrepreneurs. Interestingly, the entrepreneurs often aren't as affected if they come and start their own business, even whether it's an engineering business or whatever. They often aren't as affected as professionals who have to obtain licenses.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Gazan. I'm afraid that's the end there. Again, we really want to thank our witnesses and all the good questions coming from the committee. We'll now go to our 5-minute round, and we go to Mr. Soroka, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming tonight. To Dr. Bresnitz first, I want to ask the question, how you talked about entrepreneurs, but how important is it to have the private sector to either assist or help with the new entrepreneurs, or are they creating brand new areas that they don't have any private sector reliance on?
No, they of course have reliance on the private sector. There's no reason for them to start a business in a certain area unless there's already some kind of industry here, right? So you would like to see the relationship, and the importance here is in the agencies, in those public-private partnerships that we see sometimes in incubators and accelerators, where you see the private sector play a role in helping with networking and helping them come in back, if you'd like, especially if we're talking about students that are coming back into Canada, to help them connect with the local industry. Networking has been proven to be one of the most important tools for the success of small and medium-sized enterprises. So that's where I see mostly the role of the private sector.
Are we doing enough then to attract private industries to the universities, or are we quite maxed out right now, or what areas do we need to improve that?
That's a different question. So if you're talking about contract research, and I'm sure Professor Aiken can probably say more about that, But if you're talking about contract research, we're probably it's much easier for the larger companies to go in and for contracts with universities. It's pretty expensive, and that's a place for the government to help, right? To reduce the risk for small and medium-sized enterprises to come in on large research projects. So, I'm sure there's a lot of small companies in the area that would love to go into a research project with the lab of Professor Dan, and they probably can't afford to go in, right? So it's expensive, and that's part of where we can actually help them, because a lot of our local smaller companies, they don't have money to do extra research, right? And we talked a little bit about the research that is done in Canada. We are low on the bird. We are very, very low on business R&D. And partly it's because we don't encourage them to do business R&D, right? What you see, especially in the US and in Europe, is direct funding for research R&D of the businesses. And what we know from research is when the government provides direct funding for research, private companies will actually invest more in research than they would have done without the support of the government.
Very important, because we always talk about how the government of Canada needs to contribute more, and I mean that's the kind of the general theme, but you're right, there is a direct link between private industry investing as well, so thank you for that. I'll move on to Dr. Aiken. One of my concerns was that with the lack of funding that we've been providing to students or universities, or even to facilities for that matter, I was worried that by attracting people, because of that bad stigmatism behind that we don't have enough money to assist with the research in that. But you're telling me that's not the case. It sounds like it's still, people want to come to our universities and they're still doing. So is the only real drawback right now financial, or is there other factors that we need to consider?
Look, it's a great question, and I think universities have tried to become, as Professor Bresnitz was saying, have tried to become more entrepreneurial. We see a student body that is much more savvy than, for instance, when I went to university. They ask questions about, where is this going to take me? What is my degree going to do for me? And so I think by having innovation and entrepreneurship programming, we link them with the community where they'll work, and perhaps give them an entrepreneurial mindset. And they may or may not start a business, but they'll be a better employee if they also get that kind of education. For attracting research talent here, we don't have as much money as other countries, and I do think that it is partially financial, but there's a lot to like about coming to Canada as a researcher as well. So I see the president's going to kick me off the mic.
Thank you, Dr. Aiken, and thank you, Mr. Soroka. We'll now go to Mr. Collins for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for attending tonight. Dr. Aiken, if I could start with you first, please. And last year, the United States invested, I think it was $250 billion in science, research, and innovation. And part of that was to compensate for the brain drain, I think, that they experienced during the Trump years, not to be partisan about anything, but I think we all witnessed what impact their immigration, their archaic and in some forms discriminatory immigration policies had on attracting top talent in all sectors, and how they experienced a brain drain for those who felt some discomfort with those policies and left their country to other destinations. Can you comment on how our country's immigration policies can assist with our efforts to attract top talent? And are there things that we can do to tweak the current system to make it easier for universities across Canada to facilitate the migration of students or others, to our learning institutions?
Yeah, a great question. And as I said earlier, we are a country of immigrants. I'm the child of immigrants, and I think Canada has excellent immigration policies. I think we have for a long time. We are very welcoming to people. I happen to work at a university that's given top marks in the rankings for the international nature of our faculty. So we attract people to Canada because we have good immigration policies. Now, I am not an expert in that, so I can't speak to any detail of the immigration policies. But as I mentioned earlier, we recognize academic credentials from other universities. So if somebody's coming in with a PhD as a researcher, we know the university, we know it's legitimate, we're able to bring that person in. And so we are really able to attract talent from other countries. And we do retain a lot of our own talent because Canada is a pretty great place to live. It's reasonably safe. For all that we love to complain about it, there's not a single Canadian who would give up our healthcare system. And, we have outstanding education systems as well. So I do think we do what we can, like our policies are good. I also think the policy for students of being able to stay for up to 2 years after they finish their program in Canada has been remarkable for attracting international students here as well. I think that's been a great policy.
Thanks, Dr. Aiken. If I could, Madam Chair, through you to Dr. Poncelon de Raccord, the question I have is how the pandemic impacted the university. I think Dr. Aiken gave us a snapshot earlier in terms of some of the trends that they witnessed, or the university witnessed at Dalhousie as it relates to the pandemic. And I'm just wondering, for your university, how has the pandemic impacted your operation as it relates to attracting top talent? And what are the most pressing, I think, priorities that you need in terms of government support in a post-pandemic world?
Thank you very much. Well, as Ms. Egan just said, one of the major impacts, unfortunately, that we've seen as a result of COVID is an impressive drop in publications and research activity on the part of women in universities and younger parents. And the impacts that the pandemic has had on families and the burden that women and young parents have had to bear in looking after their children, that's also had major ramifications in that regard. Professors, teachers, researchers have had to dedicate all of their energy to changing their ways of teaching, putting all of their lessons online. That really took a lot of their energy and resources for almost 2 full years. So it's had a major impact on research activities as a ripple effect. It's also had effect on internationalization of research, if you will. Research hasn't been distributed as it has previously. And there was the whole issue of immigration. There's been a study by Citizenship and Immigration Standing Committee recently, I believe, that has attested to dysfunction, obstacles to immigration. And I think it would warrant your attention to study this further so that we bring more students to study in Canada.
Thank you very much.
Friends, I'm cognizant of time. We have 2 minutes left. To be fair to Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca and Ms. Gazan, can you each ask a very short question, short answer?
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Carbonneau. Mr. Carbonneau, could you please talk about the balance between the issue of immigration? Mr. Audic Duchesne reported that 35% of researchers who have obtained a doctorate didn't get any funding whatsoever. Is that correct? Yes. Can you hear me? Well, yes, indeed. There's an issue with Canada's capacity to provide its new generation with the tools it needs to conduct research. And Mr. Duchesne at the Université du Québec of Rimouski pointed that out. And unfortunately, a lot of our talent is being left by the wayside because they're not being given the resources they need to conduct the research, which is promising research and would have a certain impact on Canada's ability to move forward scientifically.
Thank you both. That was very short. Ms. Gazan, if I could ask you for a very short question and a short answer, please.
Yes, my last question is for Dr. Céline Posselin. You spoke about the importance of providing post-secondary opportunities that are community-based. I would agree with that. It's very difficult for students to have to be taken away from their families' supports and loved ones to leave to get a post-secondary education. Could you expand on that a little bit more?
Well, indeed, 100%. The presence of a university in a region has major ramifications. It encourages people to do post-secondary studies and students to engage in a career and to study in the region where they studied. Universities are a way of pairing up industry, researchers, students, and bringing them all together in terms of a synergy. And that also provides a cultural component as well, which makes these regions more dynamic and helps them to flourish. So there's a whole lot of benefits to be gained in that respect.
Thank you both for being so gracious with the time. Let me thank all of our witnesses. We appreciate your time, your effort, your expertise this evening. We will briefly suspend, and then our committee will go into camera. Once again, thank you to you all. Oh, right. Sorry. Yes, I've jumped ahead. We've got one more witness. We will say goodbye to these witnesses, and we will welcome one last panel. Bye then. Back. This is our last panel this evening, and we have the Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Scholars, and we have the chair, Dr. Edris Medadian. I hope I've pronounced that correct, and if I haven't, you'll let us know. We will hear from you for 5 minutes, and then we will have one round of questions from each of the parties for 6 minutes. So to our witness, for 6 minutes, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the committee. Merci de m'avoir invité.
Thank you for inviting me to appear before the committee. My name is Edris Medadian, and I'm the president of the Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Fellows. I'm also a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Waterloo, funded by the AMTD Waterloo Global Talent Foundation. I am a first-generation immigrant, a scientist, and an advocate for Canadian postdocs.
At the very outset, and on behalf of the Executive Council of the Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Scholars, I would like to acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we are sharing this land today. We are all treaty people with the responsibility to honor all our relations. I would like to start my speak with by raising a question. Do you know someone who is extremely talented, who has immense knowledge in his or her field and has done great accomplishments, but yet run into systematic problems which prevent to fully exploit his or her capacity? Today, I would like to speak about those people, the postdoctoral scholars, and their role in promoting research and innovation ecosystem of Canada. But before that, let me explain who we are. The CAPS ACPP is a non-profit professional association that advocates on behalf of Canadian postdoctoral scholars. They advocate for a range of career paths. Established in 2009, the CAPS ACCP's mandate is to improve the lives, training, and work experience of all Canadian postdocs. The vision that guides this mandate is one of a strong community in which all Canadian postdocs are provided fair and reasonable compensation, benefits, rights, privileges, and protections, as well as a supportive social network and effective support, training, and career development opportunities. Currently, there are reportedly over 10,000 postdoctoral scholars in Canada, and around 30% of them are members of CAPS. A postdoc is a temporary position that allows PhDs to continue their training as a researcher and gain skills and experience that will prepare them for their academic career. Postdoctoral scholars are highly skilled and motivated individuals that support research-intensive universities to drive academic research in Canada, while also building local networks of intellectual capital. Postdoctoral scholars have demonstrated their high achieving tendencies and abilities by earning a PhD degree. They are important human capital in knowledge-based economies, and they are major contributors to research, innovation, arts, culture, science, and policy making throughout the world. In addition to going to academic positions, these individuals frequently fill roles in a variety of fields, including the burgeoning industries and in establishing new startups, such as postdoctoral scholars represent the future innovation ecosystem of Canada. However, due to legislative ambiguity around these positions, the nature of postdoctoral positions is not defined in any provincial legislation documents. Some individuals find themselves in unfavorable position, being denied all employment benefits and, in some cases, even denied access to mandated employment protections. CAPS survey has shown that the position of postdocs across Canadian universities is highly variable and precarious. Source of funding will oftentimes dictate how a postdoc is embedded within their academic institute, resulting in a highly variable or no access to important social infrastructures such as healthcare or parental leave within the same institute. So this, together with the relative short nature of postdoc contracts, make postdocs often overlooked when it comes to creating supportive policies. The high degree of uncertainty and precarity for a postdoc is due to the following reasons, which may be a deterrent for attracting and retaining talents. Number one, postdocs are described and treated as students and trainees when they are qualified professionals. Number two, Canadian postdocs' average compensation is not keeping up with global trends. And number three, career opportunities for PhDs in Canada are not in line with the number of PhDs produced by the Canadian universities. I will pass the summary of my speak, and before I conclude my remarks, I would be remiss if I did not thank the kind and generous support that we have received over the past few years from the Tri-Council funding agencies, NSERC, SHERC, and CIHR, the Barrett Welcome Funds, and all the members of the CAPS across Canada. Once again, I thank you for this invitation, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Medadian. You're the first person who's come and really spoken from the postdoctoral that position. So we thank you for joining us. You have an eager committee who's going to want to ask you questions. We're going to go once around all parties, and each will have 6 minutes. And we begin with Ms. Gladue.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witness. We have heard a lot of testimony about how if Canada wants to attract top talent, that we need to be competitive on salary, in that currently the scholarships that we offer for postdocs and the salaries that we're offering are not competitive. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. When it comes to a worldwide standards, it's not competitive. In fact, CAPS has been done the 4th survey, the national survey with the postdocs. And what we have gotten so far, the average salary that we have noted is $52,000. And there are 25% of postdocs, they are earning less than 45K, which is not at all competitive with the other, like the postdocs in other countries. If I want to give you an example of Australia, in Australia, the postdocs are earning more than 80K at least per year. Or in US, it's not as high as Australia, but it still is higher than Canada. And that could be one of the reasons that it's a little bit frustrating when they cannot get the academic position. They are just desperately looking for other options because the salary is not literally enough to pay the bills with.
Exactly. Thank you. And, we talked about how people come for top science. Really, that's what attracts the top talent. Are there areas of top science that we're neglecting in Canada that would allow us to attract more top talent?
Well, thank you for your question. Based on our survey and what we believe, I think that based on the respondents that we got in our survey, there are 40% of our postdocs in life science, 35% in physics and engineering. Some are in, and I think that 10 or 11% are in social science. So in the social science, I would say that it needs more investment, especially when it comes to the postdocs. Sometimes we can see that it is completely ignored or neglected. That's something that we need to focus on. Otherwise, in the engineering and health science, I would say based on the capacity that Canada has shown so far, there are equal the support between two groups of postdocs.
And do you think there are other barriers that keep us from attracting and retaining the best talent in terms of postdocs?
Absolutely. Thank you for this question. It was actually part of the summary of my talk, but I didn't want to go over 5 minutes. So I'll take advantage of this question to go through that. So there are top 5 reasons that we believe that it can help to retain the postdocs as a top talent group of the Canadian or the immigrants in Canada. Number 1 is increase average postdoc salaries that we just talked about it. Number 2 is universally recognized postdocs as professional researchers, not students nor trainees. The fact is it affects the immigration process. It affects a lot of benefits that they cannot take advantage of. Number 3 is ensure postdocs have access to critical protections like CPP and employment insurance, as well as workplace benefits like health insurance. There are 18% of the postdocs in our survey that they indicated that they have not even access to provincial health care, which is very concerning. And number 4 is harmonized legislation pertaining to postdocs at the federal level, which includes sectors like immigration, employment, and taxation. I know a postdoc who was earning 50K, but still the bank was not recognizing his salary because he didn't have it was a flowship. Actually, it wasn't a salary, or it wasn't something that we considered. So there was no record that bank can accept it. And number 5 is increased federal spending in research, specifically for early career researchers like postdocs who are at the cutting edges of their field, which will increase opportunities for innovation in academic settings.
And my last question would be, are there things we need to do from a gender lens or an intersectional lens point of view when it comes to postdocs here in Canada?
Well, the fact is, based on the numbers that we have, we have observed that we have almost identical rate of acceptance for postdocs for women and men. But the fact is, what is the next step? The postdoc is a temporary position. And most of the people who want to do postdocs, they want to get into academic career, even though some people believe, which I also advocate, that they do not want necessarily become a professor, but they want to have their own research-based, like the institution, or I would say like the startups or something similar. When it comes to that point, I think for like the programs that the government has been recently like the working on, actually not recently, for a long time, which is the CERC and CRC, Canada Research Chair and Canada Excellent Researchers. I think that those are based on the numbers that I read, those are supporting women side of the postdoc, which is absolutely great to be entering the universities for like longer term. But in terms of the postdocs, I don't see any difference exactly between the men and women.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for your testimony tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you've made special efforts to be here, and we're pleased to see you tonight. And thank you again to the witnesses. We will now go to Monsieur Lauzon for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. And I'd like to thank Dr. Madigan for being here this evening. I didn't know much about the Canadian Association of Postdocs, so I was very interested to understand that your organisation does exist for our youth who are studying at universities. And I understand that you submitted budget submissions both in 2019, investing in the postdoctoral Canadian system. And in that report, well, it was a pre-pandemic report. I'd like to know, during the pandemic, what has changed in comparison to 2019, which was your last report?
Thank you for your question. This is an important question that you raised, and I believe that a lot of things changed during the pandemic when you compare with the pre-budget information that you just talked about. And based on a publication that Nature published recently, the early career researchers, which basically postdocs, they were the main people who were getting harm out of this pandemic. And when we look at that, many of the postdocs, they need to be productive during their short, the temporary position, because that's nowadays is one of the qualifications when they want to apply for positions and for jobs, especially academic jobs. They need to have publications. They need to have the expertise. They need to have the experience of the mentorship and mentoring students. So postdoc is the right spot for it. But the fact is, during the pandemic, they were, even for the short period of time, for a year or 2 years, like the postdoc, they were just seeing that the time is going by so fast, and they were more worried about it. So in terms of the numbers, I think that that was one of the things that we try to advocate for, and we touch base with council agency to make sure that there would be an extension for those postdocs who has literally burned this time and they could not take advantage of it to be productive. And of course, it depends on the different fields. There will be different outcomes. Some fields, they were more comfortable with working from home, so they still kept the productivity on, but some of them were not. So that's one of the things. One of them was about the budgets. The other thing is about the inflation. When we have when we want to adjust the salaries with the inflation, the postdocs wage has not changed that much. It's very negligible. And even though I would like to mention that even for Tri-Council or other agencies or private agencies, the postdocs, there is no wage increment over the year, not even for a 2% or 3%, nothing. It's like 45K first year and the 45K the second year. So that's another thing that has not changed, and it's even worse now that the inflation is higher. So I would say these are a part, we blame that the pandemic, and a part of that is actually a general problem is with that. It's not necessarily relevant to pandemic.
See, Thanks a lot for this answer. I also read that you work on a report in 2009, 2013, 2019, and also have one in 2016. But now I'm pretty sure that you're working on one right now. So can you give us a heads up, like a couple of lines that you're working on it right now?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. So every 4 years, we are running the surveys, the national surveys. So the last one was 2016, and we did the 2020. But the fact is the result was delayed because, like many people, again, we are a team of volunteers in CAPS, and many people were affected. So we could not process, and we wanted to have the longitudinal comparison with previous years. So what I can give as an update is it's almost out. We are going to publish that in the next month. And there are definitely comparison with previous years in terms of the increment in the salaries, in terms of the change in the demographics, for instance, in terms of the immigration and citizenship situation that we have observed in the postdocs compared to 2016 surveys. And of course, the problem with benefits that I explained, like some of the numbers that I was just talking about, for instance, if 18% of the postdocs, they do not have access to provincial healthcare, this is coming from a recent survey that is going to be published. Or we can say that only 20% of the postdocs are being supported by tri-council agencies. It means that 80% of the postdocs are supported internally, which means that the faculty member or the principal investigator of the project is supporting them. And when it comes to that end, it becomes a little bit tricky because we don't know what's happening unless the university or the institution has a collective agreement that everything is clear there.
So we only have 20 seconds left. I think we have to go very fast for this answer. Nous avez parlé beaucoup de la...
You spoke about the money that these young people learn, but you didn't refer to their student debt. Could you please speak about the level of debt that they're saddled with after studying, and then their wage isn't even enough to pay that debt back?
Sorry, Dr. Medadian. Mr. Lauzon, perhaps you could ask Mr. Medadian if he could submit it in writing so that we keep it fair.
If you want.
Thank you so much.
Because we don't have time, it's a very important question to put on the report.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Lauzon. We appreciate those questions. And now we will go to Ms. Gazam for 6 minutes.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, if I may, says Mr.
Oui, désolé.
Yes, you're giving me the floor, Madam Chair. Is that correct? Yes. Good evening, sir. Pleasure to see you here this evening. I read your brief, the pre-budget 2019 brief concerning investment in the postdoctoral training system. First recommendation, earlier you talked about the access to EI, the Canada Pension Plan. I understand that, but in the recommendations you also referred to a postdoctoral policy. Could you please elaborate on that recommendation, please?
Thank you for your question, and that's actually a very important question that you raised because, as I said, there is no clear definition of postdocs in any provincial legislation, and that causes a lot of problems when it comes to different universities because the university or the research institution will decide how to define a postdoc. I can tell you that there are universities in Quebec that define postdocs as students. There are universities, of course, in Quebec that they call them as the faculty. And the BC is the same. Some universities call them faculty, but still they are not getting benefits of the faculty. Some of them, they are being called as the staff. Some of them are even in the admin part of the classification. So all of them, I just gave the example of the BC and Quebec, but it is basically similar in every, like the province that we have done this study on. So that's about the postdocs policy. I think that it's very important to have a clear definition. about the who is a postdoc and what is his or her responsibility, and also the compensation of the postdoc. What would be the bare minimum that the institution needs to consider that? This will cause a lot of precarity and like the uncertainty that we see in different universities. I have seen a postdoc that has been paid for only 25K per year, which is not even comparable with a PhD student who's being supported. So that's basically all about the policy. But of course, there are lots of things that we need to do more survey. We need to be more aware of it. But CAPS itself, it's a team of volunteers, and we do not have access to a permanent funding or annual funding. So whenever we want to do, we just reach out to tri-council agencies or other like the agencies to see that if we can get funded for a specific surveys. But it is at least a bare minimum for us that we want to get the national survey for postdocs every 4 years.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you very much. Third recommendation in the brief, a permanent follow-up system, recruitment, retention of highly qualified staff. And it states there's no follow-up on working conditions for postdocs. Could you please elaborate on the impact that might have? Follow-up of former postdocs so that we can determine the lay of the land when it comes to the labour market for them.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I believe that part of that, if I got it correctly, a part of that item is addressing, again, the benefits, the EI CPP problem that we talked about, or the healthcare problem that we talked about, which is, again, these are a chain of the problems. They are linked to each other. It is because of the definition of the postdoc that we just talked about. And the other one is about based on the survey that we have done, only 20% of the people, they are hired at the universities at the end. Given that we are talking about a short-term positions, so a person not necessarily can get the position, an academic position in the first postdoc. Sometimes they go to the second one, the third one, the fourth one. And at the end, sometimes the fourth one is the quality is lower because there are some legislations from tri-council agencies, for instance, that there is a eligibility period that they do not accept a PhD or postdoc if the PhD is passed over 3 years. So those are the problems that it causes. So the postdoc wants to reach to the point that he or she wants to be, but still he has to try. But then the problem is there is no funding resources unless there are universities that they want to propose and offer some of the private funding. So those are the topics that I can recall, and it's kind of relate to the item that you addressed.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, on a
Thank you. We talked about recommendations about funding, clear and well-established policies. What other expectations does your organization have of the federal government?
Thank you. I believe that in addition to the salaries, which is obviously the most important part, and also the benefits that we talked, the immigration is very important. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we have over 10,000 postdocs in Canada, and 60% of them are international postdocs. It means that they need to think about their future. If they are here for the short time. Again, they go to the next postdocs. But I would say the immigration is another important topic that needs to be clear. The province by province, the legislation, it seems like it's different based on the thing that we have here. Sometimes like the administrative, like the people in different universities, they are not aware of because of those kind of ambiguity in the policy that needs to be defined for postdocs provincially and federally. So immigration is definitely, based on the number of postdocs, an important matter to talk about.
Merci, Monsieur Blanchet-Chancan. We also recognize your efforts to be here tonight, so thank you. And Dr. Medadian, it's not often you get all the questions, so I just give you a minute to breathe. It's not easy. And with that, we will go to Ms. Gazan for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Medadian. I think you've done a really good job really making it very clear how exploitive the academic system has become on scholars. Particularly in your case, for people that are doing, postdoctoral studies. So my question is this, like, how have postdoctoral and graduate unions across Canada, like the PSAC 70 or 77000 at Carleton University, been fighting for postdoctoral scholars around compensation for their teaching and research work? I know that there's unions that are getting involved because the system has become so exploitive. How has that helped?
Thank you for your question. As a person who has been in different, I would say, coast to coast in Canada, in different universities, I have experience of working with PSAC as well. So I understand that their support is really important, and it's really vital to get the things done and moving forward faster. But the fact is, there has to be a union in a university. If we look at the U15 universities in Canada, out of those U15, to our knowledge of CAPS, 10 of them, they do have postdoctoral associations and also unions. But even 5 of them, they do not have. And please remember that this is the U15, and there are 61 institutions in Canada that we have the postdocs out of them. So there are small universities. If I'm talking about Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax or University of Northern British Columbia in Prince George, all of them, they are smaller universities. They do not have definitely unions or the association. So that's definitely a problem, because for those cases, PSAC has to, if they ever reach out, because of the low number of postdocs that they have, maybe they will not even reach out to those people. But it will be a hard job to get a collective agreement established in the university to ensure that they are receiving the rights in the right way. So I would say PSAC is very helpful. For that specific case, I do not have enough knowledge to speak about the Carleton one that you just talked about, but I would say that for the one at Dalhousie that I was before, it was a very important, a very supportive help that we received from PSAC, and I wish that it would be the case for the entire, all the provinces in Canada and all the universities.
One of my colleagues prior asked a question about student debt that you weren't able to answer. As a former post-secondary educator myself, I've been a longtime advocate for no tuition. We've seen it in other countries. We know it's the way of getting the best of the best. If first of all, people aren't limited by their financial ability, but also not limited by huge amounts of debt that you acquire, especially at your level of education. Can you speak a little bit to the impact of student debt, particularly as it relates to low salaries paid to postdoctoral students?
Thank you for this question. It's a very important topic to talk about. Many of the postdocs, they are carrying over the debt that they had during their PhDs with themselves. So they have to pay it back either to the government or to the university. So the fact is, the low income does not allow them. And that's a simple answer that you can say that, because it is not the priority is paying their bills. It's not the loan, even though the loan is very important, but they are not capable and able of paying such an expense. It's the second or third, the priority for them. If it's coming from the universities, it's easier, but still they have to pay the interest, because the university is just adding interest over the year, and then at the end it depends if they are ending up with a well-paid job or not, and so will be able to pay off everything. So I would consider that as a important issue, even though I would say many of the postdocs in our survey, they have not indicated that, because again, it's kind of there are higher and more higher degrees of issue in the list that they do not see that even at this point. But I'm pretty sure that based on the people that we have been in contact with, that would be an issue. But definitely it would be a good item that we can include to see that what are exactly the numbers that we can talk about in our next survey.
Do you think one of the things that would help, and again, I mean, I find problematic, particularly with, you know, your level of education, your commitment to education, to have a set wage standard for postdoctoral students?
Thank you for this question. It's absolutely important because number one problem that the postdocs have been reporting is salaries. And as I said, 25% of the postdocs right now in Canada, they are receiving less than 45K. And the average of the salaries is 52K. So it means that still we are far from the standards from the countries that we are comparing ourselves with. Australia, US, many of them, they have to go to US because there are more like even opening and job opportunities, academic job opportunities there. And of course, they are being well paid or better paid, I would say, when it compares to Canada. So that's really important.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gazan, for your questions. I want to thank all the committee for their questions tonight. I want to thank Dr. Medadian. It is not easy to come and have all these members of parliament ask continual questions, and I think all of us recognize the job you did tonight. We thank you. We will suspend and we will come back in camera, and we have some work to do. Thank you, Dr. Medadian. See you all soon. Suspended.